If it wasn't obvious by the Murder, She Wrote, Monk, Sherlock Holmes, and Agatha Christie books behind me, I am a very big fan of murder mysteries. Hello my friends, my name is AJ and welcome back to my book nook. Today we are going to be talking about the show Only Murders in the Building. I was really excited for this show because I'm a big Selena Gomez fan. I think she's a really great actress and it's been a while since I've seen her in something. And I've also just a really big fan of murder mysteries and kind of dark comedies, so I was excited for this combination. I thought that the combination of Selena Gomez, Martin Short, and Steve Martin was a really great blend, and I thought that the dynamic was going to work really well, and I was super excited to see where it would lead, and honestly it did not disappoint. The show absolutely blew me away, both with the acting and the writing, and even some of the amazing production choices I thought were just really cool and really unique, and I was just so amazed. I was already expecting a lot and it completely went over and above my expectations. And then it dropped back down. Only Murders in the Building follows a story of three neighbors in a New York apartment named Mabel, Charles, and Oliver. The three of them are all massive true crime podcast fans, and when someone in their apartment building dies, supposedly by suicide, and they believe there to be foul play involved, they decide to make their own podcast to investigate the death. This was a really funny show. I know that the plot doesn't sound very funny, but it works really well. And there's so many things to love about this show. But like I said, it just disappointed me in the end. That's not to say that the rest of the show isn't good, and overall I think the show is a really good show, but I do want to talk a little bit about what worked and what really kind of ruined the ending for me. Let's dive right in. First and foremost, the dynamic between the three leads was perfect, honestly. Selena Gomez as Mabel was really funny. If you were a fan of Wizards of Waverly Place growing up, then you will see that her character is essentially just Alex Russo as an adult, and it works really well. She adds a lot of humor into the show, and just like when I watched Wizards of Waverly Place, I was very jealous of her wardrobe. Martin Short is playing a producer and basically just a parody of himself. He's very outgoing, very spontaneous. Again, adds a lot of humor and just kind of a little bit more chaotic nature to it. Honestly, there were moments of when he was speaking that reminded me of Preminger from The Princess and the Pauper, the old Barbie movie. This is the second time I've referenced an old Barbie movie in one of these videos, and I have no idea if any of you have even watched them, but hopefully you do, because then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Steve Martin's character is definitely the character that brings a bit more functionality and logic to the group. He's definitely a lot more level-headed. However, his character was probably my least favorite. There were often times when he did things or acted a certain way that kind of just frustrated me because it just didn't make sense for him to do that. And definitely he was the least interesting in my opinion. I think that there was more that we could have dived into his story, and they were definitely setting up a second season where we will dive more into it. So hopefully if that comes around, we'll get to learn a little bit more about him. But together the three of them mesh really well together. Their personalities come together to form a perfect team, because really your show is only going to be as strong as your leads, and the leads here were very strong. It was honestly such a good casting choice, and I think it worked phenomenally. There were so many moments with these characters that actually left me laughing out loud. There's a particular scene in one of the earlier episodes with Mabel and Charles that had me laughing out loud the entire time, and honestly they just work so well together. It was such a great choice. I mentioned that not only did the writing and the acting blow me away, but also the production choices. And a big reason behind that was some of the very creative and unique choices that they made, both with visuals and audio cues. So first and foremost, we do have to talk a little bit about the visual choices for it. From the very first episode, there were so many unique and metaphorical visuals that we were having. In the very first episode, Martin Short's character talks about this ballet piece that he saw online, where this man was trying to climb up the stairs and almost reaching it, but every time would fall off and kind of bounce back up. And then later in the end of that episode, they're showing that happening with the three different characters, with the things that they're struggling with in their personal lives, with that bouncing back up. It was such a cool addition because I was not expecting it, and they had not really given any indication that they were going to do something like that previously. They continued doing interesting visuals like that through the rest of the show, which I thought was a phenomenal way to make their show stand out. Oliver's character is a show producer for theater, and so a lot of his thinking scenes involve him visualizing things in a theater context, which I thought was a really nice touch. So there are scenes with Oliver where he's trying to figure out who the suspects are, so he'll imagine all of the suspects as people lined up to audition for a musical. And that was such a cool addition. That was such a cool way to incorporate it to specifically his character and how his character thinks. And it was so unique and so fun, and I just really, really enjoyed that. Let's also talk a little bit on the audio side of things. I thought that the score for this show, the theme, was absolutely gorgeous. The main theme reminds me a lot of Coraline, if you've ever heard that theme before. It's very sort of mysterious, but very fun, and kind of has a nostalgic feel to it. I don't know why. But the score for a show or movie is actually really, really important. It can really set the scene. And if you have bad music, then you're definitely going to notice it. Lastly, I do want to talk a bit about what I consider the best episode in the entire series, and that is episode 7. In episode 7, we focus on the sort of rich deli owner's son, Theo. Theo is deaf, so the entire episode there is no audible dialogue. There are a lot of scenes where the characters will not talk to each other even if Theo isn't in the scene. And when Theo is in the scene, the audio is even more muffled and toned down to kind of simulate what it's like from his perspective. And honestly, it's such a cool touch. I've not seen a show do that before, and I thought it was so interesting. It was really immersive. And previously to that, we had episodes that were focused on each of the main characters. So we had an episode that was more focused on Mabel and her story, one that was more focused on Charles and his story, one that was more focused on Oliver. And so having this character who's kind of more of a side character, but incorporating how he would experience the world was such a great touch, and it really made the show stand out in a very interesting way that made it not just a murder mystery, but something that was really being innovative and taking these creative choices. Now, before we dive into the third section, I do just want to give you a bit of a spoiler warning. I'm going to be talking about the final episode, and then of course who the murderer was, and all these big reveals. So if that's not something that you want to see, if you haven't watched the show yet, I highly suggest that you do not watch this next section. I will leave a timestamp down below so you can skip to my final thoughts. If you're still here, then that means that you have seen the final episode or you just don't care, but either way, I am not responsible for what you hear next. Obviously, the show started off with a very high point for me, and it kept that high point as I continued to watch each episode. I was continually blown away by the humor and the writing and the acting and the production choices. And then we got to the finale. And let's just say we didn't end on the greatest of notes. Around the middle of the show, it started getting a little bit predictable to me. And that might just be a me thing because I am a really big fan of murder mysteries and mystery shows, so I kind of know how they operate. But it was kind of clear to me very quickly that the son, Theo, who I mentioned in the previous section, I knew that he was going to be involved somehow, because why would they spend so much time pointing him out if he wasn't? And he's about Mabel's age, so that would make sense if he was involved with the previous death. And so I was pretty easy to come to that conclusion. It was also very easy for me to come to the conclusion that Jan was involved because they were spending a lot of time on her character, and to be honest, her scenes with Charles were not that interesting and they weren't that important to the plot of the story. So it didn't make sense that they were focusing so much on her character unless she was involved. So I was pretty easily able to figure that out. Like I said, that could just because I know the format of these types of shows. On the topic of Jan, I felt like her involvement was cloudy at best. I understand the idea that maybe it was a lover's spat and that after breaking up she was gonna kill him. Sure, that's like a passion thing. I can understand that. I can understand where that's coming from. Like, I've seen that sort of storyline before. But why did she then try and kill Charles? because she knows that he believes her, she knows that he's been supporting her. She didn't know that he knew yet. And so why was she killing him? That didn't make any sense. The way that they were playing it seemed like she was just crazy. The fact that she labels her poisons as Jan's little toxins and is acting so nonchalant about this and almost as if she's having fun with it. And to me that was very irritating because I think it's too easy to write off a character as being crazy and that's why they're doing this. And there was no indication that she was crazy beforehand. I didn't see any sort of foreshadowing of Jan being a poisoner. Like I said, I saw some foreshadowing that she was going to be the murderer, but the motive behind it was something that I couldn't figure out. Maybe this is just me, maybe I just missed something and someone in the comments will tell me, hopefully very nicely, that I missed something and they can explain to me why it makes sense that she was just crazy. But I feel like any mystery where it's written off as, oh, they're just crazy as the motive, that doesn't really make any sense. And it's a bit of a write-off to me. Not only that, but the final episode just felt very underwhelming to me. There was some moments in the final episode that left me laughing out loud, but for the most part, it was just very underwhelming and sort of lacked the spark that the other ones had. It was okay, but it was just okay. And see, if the rest of the show had been like that, I don't think I would have noticed. But the fact that the rest of the show had been so innovative and funny and creative, then having this ending was just sort of lackluster and left with a bad taste in my mouth. The rest of the show was so unique and well written, and the ending honestly just felt a bit rushed. The other thing that sort of irritated me was the way that the opening scene was tied into the ending. The show opens up with a scene where Charles and Oliver run down to Mabel's apartment and see her with blood on her over top of their landlady. And this is tied back into the finale where at the very end this scene is revealed and then the show ends as a cliffhanger for the next season. And honestly, that was an odd choice. Because typically when you put a scene like that at the beginning of your show, where you're beginning your show with a cliffhanger with a promise of explaining it, then you're giving a bit of a preview as to what this story is. But instead, at the beginning of the show, you're giving us a cliffhanger which you're not going to explain. You're just going to give it as a cliffhanger again at the end of the series? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you show it in the first place anyways? There's no reason to do that. Why on earth would they not just leave that cliffhanger for the end to set up season 2? Why would they show us a season 2 cliffhanger at the beginning of season 1 that they're not even going to start talking about until the end of season 1. That doesn't make any sense to me. Welcome back, my non-spoiler people. So what are my final thoughts? Overall, I think that Only Murders in the Building is a really, really great murder mystery. It has a lot of humor in it. It's got a lot of tropes of the sort of true crime podcasts and makes fun of itself quite a bit. It has a really great balance of that comedy and the drama and the darkness, but without being kind of cringy or cheesy that you see a lot. The cast is incredibly strong and has a lot of chemistry. The writing is strong. The production choices were unique and really tied the whole show together. And honestly, all of that worked together to make a very innovative and interesting show that honestly, if you're a big fan of murder mysteries, I think you should definitely give it a shot. Unfortunately, the ending was a bit of a low point in the series, and frequently that is the last thing that you remember since it's the last thing that you watched. But other than that, I think that it's a great show, and I can honestly look past the ending and still see this show for the absolute gem that it is, and I cannot wait to see the next season. Anyways, that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to hit that subscribe button and stick around if you want to see more videos like this, and feel free to hit that thumbs up button as well to let me know that you want me to see more videos specific to stuff like this, reviewing TV shows, movies, whatever. And let me know down in the comments below. Did you watch Only Murders in the Building and did you have the same feelings as me? Did you love the ending and you completely disagree with me? Let me know in the comments. I would love to have a conversation with all of you, but let's try and keep it as spoiler-free as possible so that everyone can get involved in the conversation. But that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see all of you lovely people in the next video.